Welcome and thank you for being here for our first story hour in the library for this academic year. We'd like to thank Jess Row, our author for tonight, kicking us off. And we'd also like to give a special thank you to Mrs. Dowley's bookstore, who will be selling books throughout the reading as well as after the reading that Jess has kindly agreed to do a signing for you afterwards. If you're interested in learning more about Story Hour in the library, you can visit our website. It's storyhour.berkeley.edu. You can see our full lineup for this year, as well as any of our past authors. We have videos on there on YouTube that you can check out and see what we do. We'd like to invite you back to our next month's series. It's going to be with Joyce Maynard at 5 p.m. in this room on October 9th. And so we hope you come back to enjoy that. And now at this time, we'd like to ask you to silence your cell phones. And I'd like to invite Melanie up to give her intro.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for coming. Jess Row earned his undergraduate degree from Yale and taught English for 2 years as a Yale China Fellow at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He then went on to earn an MFA from the University of Michigan. He has 2 collections of short stories, The Train to Lo Wu, which was shortlisted for the Penn Hemingway Award and was a finalist for the Kiriyama Prize, and Nobody Ever Gets Lost. He was named a Best Young American Novelist by Granta, has had 3 stories anthologized in the Best American Short Stories, and has won 2 Pushcart Prizes and a Penn O. Henry Award. In addition to being a fiction writer, Jess writes nonfiction and criticism, which often appears in the New York Times Book Review and other important places. Jess is an associate professor of English at the College of New Jersey and a member of the international faculty of the MFA program at the City University of Hong Kong. And as if this all wasn't enough, Jess has also been a student of Zen for 20 years and is an ordained Dharma teacher in the Kwam School of Zen. So you can all feel really lame for not, being ordained ministers and doing your day job. His new book, Your Face and Mine, investigates the possibly not too far away world of racial reassignment surgery. After losing his Chinese wife and daughter in a car wreck, Kelly moves back to Baltimore and encounters his old friend Martin, once a white Jewish man and now an African-American one. Martin wants Kelly to write and break his story to the world, and Kelly becomes increasingly ensnared in Martin's world, a world he too is tempted to inhabit. This is just his first novel, and it's already creating quite a stir. In a starred review, Publishers Weekly writes that the book is furiously smart, taking readers on a zesty, twisty, sometimes uncomfortable ride. While the New York Times writes, this book is adult in its weight and complexity and formidable in its thoughtfulness. Row doesn't shy away from the hard intellectual and moral questions his story raises, or from grainy philosophical dialogue. But he submerges these things in a narrative that burns with a steady flame. You turn the pages without being aware you are turning them, which is what happened to me when I read the novel. Jess writes about race and class so fearlessly that I often found myself holding my breath, waiting for the backlash from the obviously non-existent other readers along with me in the room. He wrestles with white privilege and cultural appropriation, but the fiction comes first. In class, I often quote Samuel Goldwyn Mayer, the founder of MGM, "If you have a message, send a telegram," he says. In other words, don't let your politics upstage your story. But Jess has written a novel that remarkably balances both. It is both personal and political, and both the questions it raises and the characters it brings to life will stay with you for a long time. Please join me in welcoming Jess Row.
Thank you all so much for coming. It's a great honor to be here. This is the first time I've ever set foot on the campus of Berkeley, but my grandparents went to school here in the 1930s, so I have weirdly deep roots in this place I've never visited before. Melanie did a really good job of summarizing the basic gist of what the novel is about, how the novel begins. And I'm not going to read from the beginning. I'm going to read from the second act of the book. So just to sum up what's happened so far, Kelly is the narrator. He's going to be the person speaking here. And he's moved back to Baltimore after this great tragedy in his life. He lost his wife and young daughter. And he meets this African-American man who recognizes him and reveals that he is Martin, who was one of Kelly's best friends in high school, and in high school 20 years before was white and Jewish, and now has undergone racial reassignment surgery in Thailand to become a fully believable African American man in his 30s. And he's living a sort of normative life as that kind of person. He has an African-American wife. He's raising adopted African-American children. He's an entrepreneur in Baltimore. And what he wants Kelly for, his relationship with Kelly, is that he wants Kelly to be his biographer. And he wants to he wants Kelly to develop his biography so that they can spring it on the world and make him a big celebrity and draw attention to racial reassignment surgery, which is at this point is still a secret in the world. Only a few people know about it. So as part of this process, Martin wants Kelly to come with him to Thailand to meet the surgeon who did the surgery and to get that part of the story. It's necessary for what Kelly is doing, writing Martin's biography. So the piece that I'm going to read today is the second, as I said, the second act of the novel when... Oh, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, all right. So the part that I'm going to read now is Kelly and Martin have just arrived in Bangkok, and Kelly is waking up on his first day, assuming that what he's going to do that day is go talk to the surgeon that did the racial reassignment surgery on Martin, but he doesn't know anything else about what's going to happen. Out of a dream of my childhood, a hike up Mount Cardigan on a bright autumn day, scampering up a long granite face at a gentle incline, bursts of October light filtering through canopies of yellow and red and orange. I open my eyes to the sun streaming through a gauzy curtain above my bed, the shutters drawn back, the branches of a rubber tree thrusting up into a pale sky strewn with jet trails. 5 or 6 different species of birds are singing all at once, competitively, trying to drown each other out. An avian pep rally. It's the sound of mid-morning, they're saying, the day fully established, the hard business of seed cracking and grub probing underway. And I look down at my watch and see 10:30. Someone should have come to get me by now. But since they haven't, since the day seems unscheduled, not that Martin ever gave me an itinerary, an agenda, not that I have any proof of being here other than a stamp in my passport and a boarding pass jammed into a shirt pocket, I sit up in bed and take a long breath, a waking breath, whatever that means. When you wake up in a new country, I'm thinking now, your senses are the sharpest. Newness to the touch, to the nose, to the tongue, is a series of small insults. I ought to be paying full attention. I'm on retainer after all, a professional visitor, a professional writer. Why is that so hard to say? I should be taking everything down. The room, which was dark when I came in past midnight and tumbled into bed without even turning on the bedside lamp, is much bigger than I imagined. The bedroom opens into an alcove with a writing table and a couch, and the look is Thai resort classic. Even I can see that. All teak and rattan and silk, lustrous green and gold scarves hung on the walls, a pair of brass kneeling monks on the coffee table, an antique-looking map labeled Siam over my bed. Thorough, expensive, and generic. Too perfect, like a stage set for one of those reality TV shows where I'm a strapping nitwit from Des Moines, a doe-eyed dental hygienist from Wilkes-Barre. On the writing table, in a square glass vase, there's a bouquet of orchids, of course, bound up with pencil-thin shoots of yellow bamboo. The room smells of incense and also something drier, more chemical. Wood polish? Antiseptic? Pledge? Dettol? Febreze? Somebody's put a lot of time into this, I'm thinking. It's a room that says, you're having an experience. You're getting what you paid for, without demanding anything of you at all. Someone downstairs, the birds have died down for a minute, is speaking Japanese. It's been years, and I hardly studied it conversationally, mostly just scholarly Japanese for my PhD, the stock language of articles on Asian literature and linguistics, but I can pick out a few words here and there, the shape and direction of the sentences. Of course we pay for the airport, no visa requirements, full private bath, Yaha, yes, yaha. What does yaha mean, I wonder? I will mail you the brochure, he says, whoever it is, speaking formally as to a client, a customer. Call me back. I can almost hear the bow. In Japanese, even when you're speaking on the phone, you bow. A secretary, I'm thinking, an assistant of some kind, maybe from the sound of it a separate business on the side. There's nothing unusual about that. It's just that Martin didn't mention it. But who thinks of everything? In a place this size, would I expect to be all alone? The house belongs to Martin. I'm remembering that now. In the car, pulling through the gate, Martin couldn't resist giving me a proprietary smile. You get sick of staying in hotels, he said, no matter how nice they are. And in my case, I have business interests. It makes sense to maintain a presence, an address. I let clients stay here sometimes. These perks, in the business world, sometimes that's all that matters. People are shallow. Sometimes all they want is a gesture. It's a pretty elaborate gesture, I might have said, though just to make an obvious point. Now I'm up and moving around, feeling a hollow cramp of morning hunger, post-flight hunger. My laptop bag is on the writing table, untouched. My suitcase, however, stands to one side in the bathroom or dressing room, since it has mirrors, a chest of drawers, a pressing stand. It's empty. Somebody came and put my clothes away while I was sleeping and added a bathrobe, a set of blue silk pajamas still in their plastic wrapper, a pair of rubber flip-flops and a pair of leather thongs, and, as I see when I open the closet, an off-white linen suit more or less my size. Or when I slip on the jacket, almost exactly my size, the cuffs only an inch too long. What is this, I want to ask Martin? Fantasy Island? Or callbacks for a Tennessee Williams play? On the other hand, it's a pretty nice suit. I need coffee. Coffee, a few words with Martin, a plan for the day. I shrug the jacket off, leave it hanging on the doorknob, and choose what seems to be the most neutral outfit, a black polo shirt and jeans, and slip out the door in my stiff new sandals in the blue-tiled hallway, open to the outside with tall arched windows at both ends, and down the stairs, only dimly remembering where to go. When we arrived last night, the house was dark, floating in a constant hum of crickets or katydids, and there was only Prawn to greet us, a short, stocky man, very brown, in a blue sarong and a Dallas Mavericks t-shirt, who carried all our suitcases upstairs at once. Now I come into a kind of central gallery, a breezeway, done in the same blue tiles, and following a smell of coffee, flowers, and overripe fruit, into a large open kitchen or kitchen office. At the kitchen end, a woman in a blue smock dices vegetables with a cleaver, her face covered with a surgical mask. At the other end, along one wall, sits a bank of 3 computer screens and a short, slender black man in front of them, his dreadlocks done up in a knot atop his head, tapping a pen on the desk and speaking into a headset mic in the voice I heard upstairs, perfect, unhesitating, native Japanese. And so on instinct, as travelers do, as scholars do, as a matter of habit and protocol, when he says sayonara odeshika and turns to me with a broad, bloodshot smile, I say in Japanese, "Good morning, I'm Kelly Thorndike. May I have the honor of your name?" "God," he says, "you startled I. Sorry, pleased to meet you." His English has an overloud, exclamatory, gummy quality to it, and it takes me a minute, as if 2 frames of a photograph have to be overlaid, and then I realize he's speaking with a Jamaican accent, a kind of effortful, labored accent, like Philip Michael Thomas on Miami Vice. "I'm Tariko," he says, "the office boy, head web lackey and secretary of all things Orchid. Did Martin tell you who I am? Your Japanese is not bad." I feel, for some reason, the urge to wring my hands and simultaneously the need to sit down. Inside and outside my body, the world for a moment has the consistency and smell of melting candle wax. Behind me, I hear the skitch, skitch, skitch of plastic sandals, and the woman in the surgical mask appears carrying a plate of 3 croissants and a cup of something dark and milky. "Sit down, please," she says, and gestures to a small side table. Helpless, boneless, I follow her. And when she pauses for a moment before leaving, I take a bite of croissant and chew it with my eyes closed, trying to remember what a croissant is supposed to taste like. "Tariko," I say finally, "which are you? Which am I what? Which were you to begin with?" "Oh, that!" Should have introduced I properly. I'm transitioning, of course. Originally Tariko Ogawa from Kanazawa, Fukui Prefecture, and in six months, Ras Leon Coxholden from Spanish Town. I'm the first Japanese, that is, to go all the way. "Well," I say, "it's very convincing." And then in Japanese, When I heard you upstairs, you sounded completely Japanese. When I came down here, you looked like a Jamaican, no doubt at all. Dr. Silpa is a miracle worker by Ja's grace. Would you prefer if I spoke only English? If you don't mind, he says. I have to use Japanese on the computer, of course, talking to potential clients and brethren, but otherwise I try to stay with English, part of my process. Are there Japanese Rastafarians? Of course, Japanese Rastas. I'm second generation. He reaches over to the table and flips open a thin wallet and shows me a much-creased, laminated picture. Bob Marley in his late stage, raccoon-eyed, slack-jawed, his dreadlocks thin and tumescent, shaking hands with a tiny, grinning, shaggy-haired Japanese man in a tie-dye t-shirt. My dad ran the first reggae sunsplash, he says, 1978. Took the first Japanese pilgrimage to Ethiopia. No, I'm dread as they come, 100% Nyabingi, I tall from birth. So it's natural for me, this project, this journey. His smile has a certain infectious warmth. It exudes contentment, confidence, ease. Why make it so hard, the smile says. The mark of a natural salesman. He could sell junk bonds, burglar alarms, timeshares, used cars, Mormonism. Whatever it is, I'd think about it for an extra moment. I'd be tempted. You'll have to forgive me, I say. I'm a little out of my element. Martin didn't tell me that anyone else would be here. I'm not surprised, Tariko says. We're a bit of a state secret. But look, take your time, man. You just got off the plane. Take it easy. He turns back to the computer, and I take another 3 bites of my croissant and a sip of coffee. Bite, breathe, bite, breathe. Out on the street, out of sight, excuse me, a motorbike roars by, unmuffled, loud as a chainsaw. The sunlight pouring in through the doors has a pale, dusty tinge, and I'm beginning to realize that among other small insults, the day is taking on real heat, massive, physical, dry season heat, not the plangent tropical skin bath I expected. We can't see anything but the garden, of course, but I can feel an echo, a restlessness in the air, a suboral buzz, the resting tone of the vast city. After a day or so, I won't even notice it anymore. What does it mean, I ask myself, that Martin didn't tell me? Did he really lead me to believe that he was the only one? Out of the whole world, out of all the possible variations? The first American, maybe. The first white to black? And then, as Americans do, I didn't stop to consider the rest of the world, all the other possibilities? Tariko, I say, I have a question. Yes? In Japan, is it a secret too, what you're doing? No one else knows? Of course it's secret, he says, smiling broadly, as if it's the most foolish question in the world. Or else why wouldn't you have heard? News travels fast in the first world. And when you go back? I'm never going back. Not me. No point to it. At the end of this, I'll be in Jamaica for good. Jamaica in body, Zion in soul. And your clients, your potential clients? They know what's on the site. Haven't you seen it? We're still updating it all the time, of course, but there it is. He gestures me over to the screen and clicks the browser's refresh button. That and only that, he says. A dark blue screen appears with a line drawing of an orchid unspooling in white across it, and then at the bottom, like credits in a movie, one line comes into view, fades, and is replaced by another. Who are you? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you see you? Do you dream in another language? Do you dream of starting again in a new skin? Start here. The Orchid Group invites you to consider the possibilities of a new you, an entirely different appearance from skin to hair to physical features of every kind. At the frontiers of reconstructive and reassignment surgery, we can accommodate the needs of clients who feel that their psychological health depends on a radical physical transformation other than gender. We are a full-service healthcare provider based in Bangkok that offers psychological assessment and counseling, lifestyle enhancement, language and dialect tutoring, sequential transitioning care, and a full range of surgical procedures. Under the leadership of Binfalong Supasavan, MD, Harvard Medical School, former assistant professor of plastic and reconstructive surgery, University of Rochester. Our staff are native speakers of English, Thai, Japanese, Korean, Spanish, Tagalog, French, German, Italian, and Russian. All our services are offered in complete confidentiality. We offer payment plans and loans through HSBC Thailand Limited. The text block fades, replaced by a mosaic of smiling faces, an African woman, very dark, with a kente headband, a dashing, square-jawed Asian man with a pearly grin, a strawberry blonde girl, Swedish or Polish or maybe Russian, a thin, ashen-faced hipster in an Oxford shirt and enormous square glasses. As I watch, each photo dissolves into a new one: an Arab man with a goatee, a severe-looking Latina with arching eyebrows, a Native American man in a suit, a Filipina or Indonesian woman in a hijab, a teenager with a Jennifer Grey nose and bobbed curly hair, a Chinese kid with dyed blonde spikes, and thug life tattooed across his breastbone. It's exhilarating trying to label them all, to enumerate the possibilities, like a Benetton ad, of course. That's what anyone would say, only hitched to the mathematics of a Fibonacci sequence, a difference machine, a deck of cards that always reshovels itself, a self-producing maze, reproducing maze, a cancer cell, adding a new layer at every turn. This isn't tomorrow. This isn't you seeing tomorrow. This is tomorrow seeing you. That's what you call it, I say? A radical physical transformation other than gender? Yeah. Doesn't sound quite right, does it? But right now, we don't have any choice in the matter. You can't say race, otherwise the hounds will be at your back. Can't say ethnic. Same thing. It's confusing, no doubt. I'm the one who's here answering the phones all day, trying to tell people we can't make them into a dwarf, can't make them 6 feet tall, can't make their penis 2 foot long. It's time to lift the veil, if you know what I'm saying. I guess that's your job. So Mr. Wilkinson told you that part. Of course, the whole marketing plan. The computer pings, a chat box is opened up with a line of Japanese. Toriko glances at it and makes a kind of 21st century shrug, slightly shifting his weight back toward the screen. Are you really more important than what my device is telling me? I'll let you get back to work, I say. But Toriko, one more question. Of course, anything. How many of you are there? Of me? Of us? Prototypes, you mean? 2 so far, officially. Including Mr. Wilkinson? Including him 3. Will I get to meet them all? You already have. I look over at the woman in the mask, back at her dicing now, but still within earshot. Julina, Toriko says, don't be shy. Take that thing off. Come here. When I turn in her direction, she's already slipped her mask down under her chin and looks so much like someone I should know that for a moment I wonder if she's famous, say, or an Amherst grad, a WBUR employee, a Harvard woman. She has any Korean woman's pencil-straight black hair, held back in an ordinary high ponytail, but very light skin, a little more pink than I would have expected, a thin, aquiline nose, a wide mouth, full lips, and round, curious hazel eyes. I would have guessed in another circumstance that she was biracial. In truth, if you dyed her hair, she would have no discernible Asian features at all. Julina, she says, hands tucked beneath her breasts. Kelly, right? You're Martin's biographer. Welcome, make yourself at home. She speaks with the flat, disaffected politeness of a gallery receptionist in Chelsea, and then looks over my head at Toriko as if to say, can I go now? Julina's mad because you took her spot, Toriko says. She was hoping to write the big book on racial reassignment surgery. From a scholarly point of view, of course. She's a professor. But also a participant? I put the question to the air halfway between them, expecting Toriko to answer, but hoping Julina will. Anthropologist, he says. This is field work. We're her tribe. Like getting tattoos if you work with the Maori. I was an academic too, I say, turning in her direction, still feeling, against all indications, that I know her, that we should already be acquainted. At Harvard, I say, East Asian Studies. And? She's back at the counter now, still chopping. Whatever she's preparing could feed 50. And I left, went over to journalism, public radio. Why, your advisor didn't like you? No, not at all. It's such a direct question, coated with insult, that I have to swallow a moment before going on. I needed money, I say. I had a baby daughter. There weren't any jobs out there I wanted to take. We didn't want to leave Boston. Anyway, I was done with what I wanted to do. One book, one area of research. I was exhausted. Every life takes its own pathways, Toriko says. Right? Right. No, Julina says. Wrong. She turns to face us, her mask slipped back on with a block of tofu in one hand and a cleaver in the other. What do you know about every life? Either one of you. What do you know about your own lives, for that matter? Pathways. There aren't any pathways, only patterns you don't recognize yet. If you knew it was a maze, you wouldn't take the bait, would you? There's a certain refractory gleam in her eyes, a light thrown off from another source, the look of a fanatic, the absolute certainty and the oblique carelessness, the gnomic casting away of words. It repels me like a force field. I take another sip of coffee, stand up, and walk the other way, through the hallway and out the open door. This is morning, I tell myself, for the 4th or 5th time. This is Thailand. The yard is as manicured as every other part of the house. An undulating lawn, close cut, and enormous, almost comic plants spilling over the neat borders of piled river stones. Thick shrubs with heavy, shiny, waxy leaves, ginkgo, bougainvillea, ferns, camellias. Here and there are enormous ceramic jars as big as bushel baskets, filled with water, lotuses blooming from lily pads on the surface. I look down into one and see tiny goldfish, or what I assume are goldfish, flicking about, some no bigger than my smallest fingernail. Prawn stands barefoot at one corner of the garden, near the wall, gathering mangoes with a long two-pronged hook. The mangoes, entirely green, fall into his palm one by one, and he tosses them lazily into a bushel basket. Seeing me, he smiles and raises his free hand in a half Y. "How you sleep?" he says. "Sleep okay?" "Excellent, thanks." "Want anything? Kitchen?" Julie and I gave me breakfast. At this he says nothing and returns to his work, peering up into the tree's canopy for hidden fruit. There's something deeply wrong, enormously, intensely wrong, but here in the sunlight, the smell of the bougainvillea and the faint rumblings of the city outside, a blast of tinny Thai pop from a car radio, a shouted exchange in the street, two friendly voices singing at each other, it fades without disappearing. A faint, barely noticeable smell of rot and open latrine somewhere on the premises. It's been so long, nearly 5 years, that I've forgotten the simple gladness of waking up in Asia. Not at home, not at home, the little song my heart used to sing every time the plane landed in Beijing, Hong Kong, Tokyo, as if I'd gotten away with something. Of course I had gotten away with something. I'd escaped. I have escaped, even if only hypothetically. A hypothetical escape from an actual crime. Why did that never enter into it? Why in all these years did I never pause to consider myself a fugitive, if only in my own mind? Not once, because I was so sure no one knew? On the far corner of the garden, across the driveway, is the spirit house for the property, a miniature temple, white with a red roof, set on a pedestal and hung with orchid garlands as offerings. San Prapum, the name comes back at me from the lonely planet I read on the plane. Every house in Thailand has to have one, no matter how humble or small. The roof with its curlicue edges, each side curving toward the sky, always reminds me of flames licking upward. Every house is a house on fire, as the Buddha said in the fire sermon. You should regard your own body and everything around you as if it were on fire. Was it the flames of desire or the flames of impermanence? Or both? Or are they one and the same? The result is the same. Every house is a house burning down. Leave. The word hovers in the air as if the bushes had breathed it. What would I need? Just a quick trip back upstairs, my passport, my wallet, the envelope of baht Martin handed me in the airport. "Spare you an ATM charge," he said. "Here's some walking around money." We're somewhere out in the suburbs. It might take me an hour or two to find a taxi, but how hard could it be? $20 and a universal gesture, the flattened palm rising up to the sky. There are alarm bells ringing across continents in my brain. Pran touches my sleeve. He's come up next to me on the grass silently and holds out in his palm a dark purplish fruit cut in half. "Mangkut," he says, "Thai fruit." The inside looks like a peeled head of garlic, little white sections, half moons in a woody shell. Gingerly, I take two. They dissolve on the tongue. Isn't that the phrase? Like very soft pineapple or lychee, with a chewy nut-like piece at the center. Amazing, I tell him. He hands me the rest. "Eat more," he says, and gestures with a folding knife in his left hand. Something's happening, I notice. Too late, as I pop the final section into my mouth. A counter-reaction, a sour liquid rising in my throat and pooling under my tongue, and at the same moment my knees tremble, a definite single knock, a jolt, a need to sit down. Is it an allergy? I don't have any allergies. No intolerances, not even when it comes to food, any very strong dislikes. My stomach, though, now has woken up, and something is happening. It's beginning to turn, not so much nausea as dizziness, disorientation, as if my blood is being drained and diluted, half strength. The gray hour. And with this thought, as if on cue, Martin's Mercedes comes rattling through the gate, its mirrored windows glinting, his arm reaching out toward me in a lazy wave. Thank you very much. I would love to take questions. If anyone has questions, I'm going to have to do a kind of a whip with my head because the room is so wide. But if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll. Yeah, all the way in the back.
I guess my question is, how did a plot like this come about? It's pretty, well, it's interesting. Let's just say that.
Yeah, sure. How did the plot come about? Is that the question? How did I get the idea? I got the idea in a kind of a strange way. I happened upon a book by a critic named Sander Gilman, called Creating Beauty to Cure the Soul, which is a book about the history of plastic surgery. And the invention of the nose job is basically most of what the book is about. It's about the invention of rhinoplasty by German Jewish surgeons determined to erase what they perceived to be their Semiticness in Germany in the 19th century. Just riffling through that book, somehow it came to me, what if there were the 21st century equivalent of a procedure of racial reassignment that would be total and that would be accessible to anybody? And it just sort of came to me. And then the Baltimore piece, the Baltimore piece came to me because that's where I'm from, and one of the real reasons why I wanted to write this novel is because it connected so deeply with the experience I had when I was a teenager in Baltimore of getting wrapped up in hip-hop culture and having white friends getting wrapped up in hip-hop culture and really feeling a sense of a gender divide, a racial divide, interesting slip of the tongue, a racial divide almost beginning to blur in a sort of interesting way. And really knowing white peers who I remembered at the time that I began the book. I really remembered, expressing the desire to be black, effectively, either through performance or through words, but really expressing that desire and wanting to write a book that came to terms with that in some way. And then the rest sort of just unspooled from there. Just tried to make it as problematic as possible from the get-go. Other questions? Yeah.
Have you been to Thailand?
Yeah, I've been to Thailand, but I lived in Hong Kong for 2 years, and I went to Thailand beginning then in the late 90s. And I went and did an actual formal research trip for this book where I went and talked to plastic surgeons in Thailand that specialize in gender reassignment surgery, which is a very big business there. And I had this very interesting experience of having these surgeons, telling the surgeons what my book was about, and having the surgeons say to me, that already exists. They just don't use that word for it. That the racial reassignment, in their perspective, was something that's already happening. Just not with the kind of total sci-fi approach I have here, just sort of piece by piece, but in their perception, the desire for racial reassignment was self-evident. It was something they saw every day. So it really, that really hit me. Other questions? Yeah.
Two questions. One is about something you just mentioned, which is the sci-fi basis for the novel and how that came in, why you decided to make it a technology rather than simply, as you said, a performance.
Mm.
And the other question is about why you chose to make the main character go from white to black rather than black to white, or that character, Martin.
Yeah. The sci-fi part, the technology part, has to do with observing the amount of surgical change and technological change, medical changes and procedures that have developed over the last 30 years, and really trying to think of what is the logical next step. And to me, in some sense, this is the logical next step, is to formally designate a category, a thing called racial reassignment. Because the surgical tools, the technological tools, some of them already exist, and a lot of them are just sort of on the cusp of existing. And so, for me, it just seemed interesting, and also something I could really build an interesting novel around. the second part about passing white to black that's a question I've gotten a lot, because the traditional passing narratives, especially in an American context, tend to go the other way. And really, you know, as I was saying a moment ago, to me it came mostly out of my own experience of witnessing the desire of white people to take on blackness. But also wanting to raise the question of what that means, you know, and to really look at the ways in which we think of passing as being access to privilege, access to power, access to status. But there's so many kinds of physical transformations and ethnic transformations out there that go the other way and that have to do with fetishizing a certain kind of otherness or a certain kind of exoticness or a certain kind of authenticity. And so I wanted to put that front and center because it was something that hadn't been done before. And it seems so clear to me that it was happening in the world and I just hadn't seen it in fiction. Yeah, Sunisa.
Did you have any hesitations taking this on, or maybe enthusiasm, but knowing that race and what you're writing about could provoke some strong reactions?
Yeah, well, one of the first people I talked to about the novel, somebody who was involved in my career, said, "Don't write that novel." You know, I told her the idea, and she said, I don't think I'd written any of it at all. This is quite a few years ago, and she said, "Don't write it. You don't want the kind of trouble that novel is going to bring you." Said words to that effect. So, from the very beginning, I was warned. I had a lot of trepidation, and what I tried to do was, at every step of the process, take my trepidation and fold it into the text, so that the issues are layered into every sort of fear or reservation I had is sort of layered somewhere, like a lasagna into the text, so that you bite into it and you get a little bit of sort of the grit of how difficult it was to put all these things together. That was very intentional. That trying to make it an experience of reading that sort of bites back at the reader. Yeah, Melanie.
In addition to that, so having read a lot of the reviews in preparation for the intro, I didn't see a lot of that resistance that I thought I would at least come across a little bit of. So
I can show you some reviews that clearly you missed.
Have you had any kind of, or can you share any of the?
You want me to share my bad reviews?
It's actually not less of from a craft point of view or
Yeah.
critical point of view, but more of have you had any emotional kind of reactions to?
Yeah.
That was what I thought I would see more of and didn't.
Right. There was one review that came out very early. It was a review by an African-American woman, and she said it was a blog review, so it was very personal. She said, "I expected to hate this book, and I wound up liking it much more than I thought," which made me feel very nice. But she said that she had a lot, and I've heard this from a number of people, she had a lot of resistance because she was reading Martin. She felt like the book is presenting Martin as somebody who is not black, but who is fully passing for black. And she voiced it as a sense of disloyalty. That was her experience of reading. I thought that was really, really interesting. And really, I was really glad to get that response. I was glad that she also walked away liking the book, but it was really interesting to hear that. That there was a sense of displacement or disloyalty, even in reading the character, that she felt she was betraying her own sense of identity or belonging. Yeah, by belonging, or even by taking him seriously as a black man in the first place. You had a question.
I think my question was similar. How have African Americans reacted to it? So I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
With a great spectrum of responses, the whole spectrum of responses, positive, negative, querying. There a number of writers pointed out that they felt that the novel doesn't take seriously enough the qualms that a person would have about being transformed into an African American, about being subject to violence and being subject to the day-to-day, what one critic called the liability of being African American. And when I thought about that, I thought, she has a point. It's not that I didn't think about it, but I really wanted to create a character who, Martin is a character who's an entrepreneur and somebody who sees blackness as almost entirely positive. Because in the end, what's revealed later in this section is that his mission, fundamentally, is to make blackness a global brand and then turn ghetto communities in the United States into places where that brand can be taught and commodified. You know, he views it on that level. And that's a very eccentric and polemical, and it's meant to be very disturbing. So, but one thing that doesn't draw attention to is it doesn't draw attention to it doesn't draw, you know, he is deliberately trying to present blackness in a very positive light. And it is very one-sided, and some would say inauthentic or problematic. And, you know, I was trying to bring all of that in there. But, you know, maybe, you know, I missed things, maybe. I mean, you know, and the world in which I was writing this novel was the world before Trayvon Martin and before Ferguson. And I think if I were writing this novel and finishing it now, it would be quite different. Those things would have to enter in somehow. Yeah.
I'm really just responding to the fact that you said it was a novel written before Trayvon and before Ferguson.
Yeah.
There have been so many incidences.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your time period.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I wonder, I have two questions or wonderings. I don't know if you have to respond to them necessarily. One is, how does this idea of racial reassignment highlight white privilege as still being privileged?
Yeah.
Both in you as an author to be able to write on the topic.
Mm.
And secondly, how did you imagine, or did you imagine, this text being able to reconfigure racial identity to make it more complex rather than for it to be stereotyped? Because you used the word, he was a normative black person, which I thought, what the hell was that? You know? But, so how do you, if you want to respond to either of those, how do you respond?
Yeah, well, you know, white privilege is something that I can't undo or evade, right? So the book is an expression of my white privilege, as everything else about my life in some ways an expression of my white privilege. And what I can say about that is that in the book, I try to meet that head on as best I can, but no way of presenting the book can undo the fact that it has a certain status in the world because I'm a white writer. So that's a risk I thought long and hard about, and it's a risk I was willing to take, but it's still a risk, right? It's still it's an imperfect situation, to put it you know, it's a fraught situation. And I like to think that I stepped into it with open eyes. But my eyes are only as open as a partially sighted person can be. That's this. And the second thing, I'm sorry, can you say the second question again?
Sort of making racial identity and ethnic identity more complex through this notion of having racial
reassignment. Yeah.
rather than the normative black person.
Right.
Martin had turned into being.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say Martin has turned into what he views or what he tries to create as a kind of a certain kind of black identity. It's one kind of normative black identity. And he's worked very hard to create, you know, a facade that's totally consistent so nobody will question him. And, you know, I think it's an open question, and some people have brought this up. Would such a thing be possible, right? Some people have said, like, would it be possible for somebody to pass and to carry off the illusion that Martin is carrying off? And my response to this, some people have been very skeptical about that, and my observation about that is that there have been so many instances of passing of all kinds in American history that that are really shocking. Like, how did people pull this off over decades? You know, that's the kind of that's the basis I was working with. But it's a work of speculative fiction, and so it's meant to speculate rather than decide. Other questions? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that you said growing up you had a lot of friends who, a lot of your white friends felt that they wanted to effectively be black. And so based on that, I'm just wondering how much, if any, of yourself did you intend to write into the character of Kelly? And after having finished the work, how much of yourself did you find in Kelly? Were you surprised to find yourself or lack thereof?
Now I have to decide whether I'm going to give away the end of the novel or not, because your question sort of prompts it. So what Kelly is, I'm not gonna do the whole spoiler, but Kelly at the end is confronted. Martin asks him whether he wants to become Chinese, whether he wants to have the surgery and become Chinese. And at the end of the novel, he's faced with the decision of whether or not he undergoes the surgery and becomes the first white man to become Chinese through racial reassignment. Chinese, I should say, through racial reassignment surgery. And that, I had a surprising amount of identification with that thought process. And it was, it was partly because I think as you're writing a novel, you sort of get more and more in the character's world, and no matter who the characters are, there's a little bit of a slippage between your identity and your character's identity. But also, what Kelly is thinking about at the end when he's going through the process of trying to decide, and he's literally at one point, he's looking at his own body. And he's looking at his own body in the doctor's office with this plastic surgeon there saying, I can change this, I can change this, I can change this. And I had this moment of real deep identification because of, all the feelings I've had over my life about how many things I'd like to change about myself. And what if somebody actually dangled the possibility in front of me or in front of anybody and said, we can do anything, other than you can't make you tall or, but you can do anything, we can change your appearance so radically. And you could become, what Kelly is thinking is, I want to look like Beat Takeshi, who's this Japanese, he's sort of like the Japanese Robert De Niro. That's the kind of person he wants to look like, just in a kind of a joking way. I had this moment of thinking, of really wondering, like, would I do it or would I not do it? And I think a lot of readers I've talked to have had that same moment of thinking, like, would I do this were the chance offered to me? Would I alter anything, or would I go all the way? It's a very interesting question. It's sort of an existential question. And I really got into it. I was really, gripped by it briefly. So yeah, I did. There's a lot of autobiographical material about Kelly, but also just the emotional sort of arc of the novel. There's a lot of me in there too. More questions? Anyone else? Last one? Yeah, Melanie.
So, this is a very mechanical question after all these lofty ideas. But, and because we just talked about this in class by class today, and this is for my students here. So, why did you choose not to use quotation marks? I have a little essay on my blog about it that I can point you to. It quotes Adorno, so it's acceptable reading at the University of California, Berkeley. It does have a quotation from Adorno in there. Adorno has a great essay called Punctuation Marks. It's very short, very accessible. I highly recommend it. The reason why I stopped using quotation marks was because my fiction sort of took a turn in my 20s when I was in Hong Kong and I was starting to write about Hong Kong, and I really wanted to make a decisive break with the kind of Raymond Carver, Richard Ford, drunk guys in Montana fiction that I had been writing up to that point. I wanted to make a decisive break, and I was reading a lot of people like Michael Ondaatje and Cormac McCarthy, a lot of writers who abstain from quotation marks. And I really, it was sort of just a stylistic choice that I made at the time, and it was only later that I realized what I was really trying to create was a feeling that the whole fiction has a dreamlike quality.
you know, that there isn't such a sharp differentiation between narration and dialogue, so that it all feels like it's happening in a dream. And the thing I like about it is that it makes the fiction look on the page different from what I would say from nonfiction. It makes it look different from, say, text that you read in a newspaper. It gives it a kind of a quality that you have to sort of fall into in order to get the rhythm of it. I know some readers really just don't like it, and you know, I think about it all the time. Like, should I go back? Because there's a really, you know, some people it's difficult for them to get into it. It's difficult for them to tell who's speaking. But that's the reason why. It's because I really like to have that kind of that dreamlike quality that you sort of fall into the text and you're experiencing it all as something made up, as something dreamlike, something fictional, because that's what it is, of course. I guess that's it. Thank you all so much for coming. We're honored by your presence.
If you'd like to purchase a book, Mrs. Dalways is selling over there, as well as we will bring Jess over and he will sign them for you. And if you brought a copy of any of his other books, I'm sure he's willing to sign them as well. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you see you again on October 9th for Joyce Maynard.